this video, we will cover setting up a session in a TriCaster. When working with a TriCaster, each production can have its own session file. A session contains all of the info needed for setting up your production. It remembers all of your input and output settings, all of your content and where it was loaded, your streaming and recording settings, and a whole lot more. This way, you can easily transition from one show to the next with very little setup in between. Every TriCaster session starts on the home page. In this video, we will cover the home page and its options, starting a new session and all of the variables associated with it. We will look at the live desktop and cover setting up all of the inputs and outputs for the session. We will cover setting up, recording the production, and setting up the still image grabber. Finally, we will cover backing up and restoring sessions. Let's get started. When you first launch the TriCaster, it will take you to the home page. From here, you will see the icon ring. Let's take a look at the different options available from this icon ring. Select the Help icon. From here, you have several options. You have access to the user guides available for the TriCaster and some other products. The user guides are displayed as searchable PDF files. These files can be printed if you like. Do not try and print from the TriCaster. The easiest way to print a user guide is to find the user guides on newtek.com on another computer that is attached to a printer. On the NewTek site, go to the Support menu and choose Documentation. Here you will find all user guides for all NewTek video products. Simply open the user guide and print from that computer. This is also where you can get the About box for the TriCaster. This box contains info on the build number of your TriCaster software and may be needed if you are contacting NewTek for support. You will find the build number here. The add-ons area shows user guides for accessories available for the TriCaster. Here you have a user guide for the Virtual Set Editor. A demo version of Virtual Set Editor comes with the machine, so you can use this user guide to try it out and see if you like it. Then you can buy the full version, install it, and this will remove the watermark on the output that you get when you use the demo version. To access the demo version of Virtual Set Editor, go to the Add-ons icon, and here you will see the Launch button for the demo version of Virtual Set Editor. Once you buy and install a full version, it will be launched from the same icon. Once you are ready to start a session, go to the New icon. There are a few things you need to set up here. First, let's give the session a name. We will call this session Get Started. If you don't give your session a name, it will default to that day's date. If you start more sessions in the same day without naming them, they will all be sequentially numbered along with the date. It is recommended that you give each session a unique name so it's easy to tell them apart. Next, you need to choose a session drive. If you don't have any external storage hooked up through any of the eSATA ports, then this will always be the D drive. But it could be an external drive connected through the eSATA ports. Do not use a USB drive as a session drive, even though it shows up in the list. Only the internal D drive or media attached through the eSATA ports should be used. This drive will store all of the session information. It would be possible to select the D drive as the session drive and then record your show to a drive connected through the eSATA ports. Remember, you will need all of the drives used in the production to restart that session. For this new session, select the D drive as your session drive. The TriCaster is available in standard and multi-standard versions. A standard TriCaster only has NTSC as a selection here. A multi-standard unit will allow you to choose to produce in either NTSC, NTSC-J, or PAL. When setting a video standard like NTSC, all inputs and outputs must match this standard. If it is an NTSC session, then all inputs and outputs will be NTSC. Select your appropriate standard. Next, you want to choose your resolution for the session. This will be the resolution that is set for video output number 1 of the system. You can choose from high definition in 1080i or 720p, or standard definition at 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratios. This does not affect what resolutions can be brought into the session. You can mix and match input resolutions, and the TriCaster will upconvert or downconvert to match the resolution of the session on output. From this point, you would hit Start Session, but don't do that yet. We'll come back in a minute to start the session, but first, let's finish exploring the options here on the home page. Once you've created a few sessions, you can now open any session from the Open icon. Simply left-click on the name to launch it. You can also right-click on a session name to rename it. This is also where you can restore a session to a particular drive when a session has been backed up. The shutdown icon also has a few selections. You can restart the TriCaster, which will cause the machine to reboot and return to where you currently are. You can shut down the TriCaster, which will power it off. And you can also go to the administrator mode. Now, let's go back to the new icon and select the Get Started session. This will take you to the session page for that session. On the session page, you see the name and resolution of the session in the upper left-hand corner. There are 2 icons on the menu ring. Click on the Manage icon. This is where you can manage all of the media you will use during the live production. If you want to use video clips, audio clips, stills, or titles, this is where you'll import them. Media can be imported from external media like USB drives or even across the network. If you're going to import media from a USB drive, plug it in now. To import clips for use during a live production, hit the Import Media button. This will open the Import Media requester. Hit the Add button. Now you can navigate to any drive attached to the TriCaster. Navigate to where your media is and select it, then hit Open. Now you see your clips in the Import Media list. The TriCaster will allow you to import many types of video formats and resolutions. Some clips can be used natively with no conversion, and some will need to be transcoded for playback in the TriCaster. When importing video clips, 3 things can happen. 1, the clip is added to the list, and the transcode button is off and ghosted. This means the clip will play with no conversion. 2, the clip is added to the list, and the transcode button is on and ghosted. This means the TriCaster knows it needs to transcode this clip on the way in, and it will do so. 3, the clip is added to the list, and the transcode button is off but not ghosted. This means the TriCaster thinks it can play the clip with no conversion. You can import the clip with no conversion and test playback. If there is an issue, you can re-import the clip and transcode it for smooth playback. You can load audio clips, stills with and without transparency, and CG pages saved out of external live text. You can repeat this process to add different media types from several locations. Once you have your media loaded into the requester, hit the Import button. You will see the progress of the clips as they're imported. Once everything is imported, the Import Media requester is empty again. Close the requester. When the content has been imported, you can look to see that all of your content is there. The Browse buttons allow you to easily do this. If you want to look at any imported video clips for the currently loaded session, click on the Clips button. This will take you to the Clips folder for that session. In here, there can be up to 3 folders: Import, Capture, and saved streams. The import folder holds all imported clips. Capture will have anything that was recorded by the TriCaster during the live show. And saved streams will have any recorded streaming files that were archived from the live show. If you have not imported, recorded, or streamed any media in this session, these folders will not be present. They are created during these operations. Let's talk about the directory structure and where everything goes. Your TriCaster has one internal hard drive with two partitions. These are the C and D drives in your system. You should use the D drive as your media drive. External drives can be used only if they are eSATA and attached via the eSATA ports. Don't try to use a USB drive to record or play back from, since it's not fast enough. On the session drive, the TriCaster will create a media folder. Inside the media folder, you will have the types of media available, including clips, sound and music, stills, and titles. In each of these folders, you see the sessions that are stored on that drive. If you click on the Clips folder, you will see the Get Started session we created. Go into that folder, and you will see an Import folder. Inside this Import folder are the clips you imported. You can see the path in the requester: D, Media, Clips, your session name, and then Import. That's where every clip that you import, video clip that you import, is going to end up. So all of your imported audio clips will be in D, Media, Sound and Music, session name, Import. And all of your stills will be in D, Media, Stills, your session name, and then the Import folder. Close the Windows Explorer window. Once all your media has been imported, you are ready to start the live desktop. Click on the Live button in the menu ring, and then click on Start Live Production. You are now looking at the live desktop. This is your control room for your live production. The interface is basically broken down into three sections: the multi-viewer across the top, the live control section featuring the video mixer and the downstream keyers are in the center, and the tabbed interface along the bottom giving you access to the internal media players, such as the digital disc recorder, the graphics players, as well as the audio mixer. This is also where you have access to the virtual input setup tabs for controlling virtual inputs and other effects. The multi-viewer allows you to see the internal and external channels during a live production. You have separate monitors for all 4 video inputs, 2 network inputs, and internal media players such as the digital disc recorder and the 2 graphics players, which are displayed here. There's a large program monitor to see what's going out live, and a preview monitor to see what will go out live if a transition is performed. Now, each one of these monitors represents a channel in the switcher that can be configured in some way. You can rename any button and any monitor on the interface to suit your production needs. Right-click on any monitor's title bar or any button on the switcher and select Rename. Setting the input name changes the label on the monitor, and changing the button label changes what's displayed on the button in the switcher. Remember, there's not a lot of room on the button, so the names for the buttons should be very short. When renaming a monitor, you could add a shot type or camera location, such as close-up or wide shot, so that when you're looking at that input monitor, you can easily identify what and where that source is. As you mouse over any of these monitors, you will see the gear highlight in the upper right corner. These gears appear all over the interface, and they are used to configure whatever they are associated with. A gear next to an input monitor will bring up the configuration panel for that input. The gear attached to the output monitor will bring up the output configuration panel. The gear set off on the interface by itself configures the interface. Let's click on it. Here, you can set the tabs along the bottom of the interface to follow preview for all inputs or virtual inputs. This means whatever you select on preview also is selecting the corresponding tab along the bottom of the interface. You can do this for all inputs or virtual inputs only. For now, set it to follow tabs for virtual inputs. Let's click on the gear for camera 1. This brings up the input configuration panel for camera 1. From here, you can use the connection type pop-up to choose the type of video coming in. You can bring in 1080i component, 720p component, or standard definition in 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratios. Standard definition video can be brought in as component, composite, or YC video. By default, the resolution will be set to whatever the session is set up for, and this will be displayed right here. If you start a 1080i session, then all video inputs will start out as 1080i. You can bring in a different format or resolution on each input, and the TriCaster will up or down convert whatever you feed it to match whatever the session resolution is on the way out. Let's set up camera 2 as 720p. This is really a 1080i signal, so the input shows you video that doesn't quite look right. Change the input to 1080i, and the video now looks correct. Also know that different formats represent different levels of quality. The best quality input for this TriCaster is a component input. This is all that is available for high definition video. If working with standard definition video, the quality scale starts with the best, which is component, then YC, then the lowest quality is composite. A good rule to remember is composite video is fine for a straight video feed, but if you're going to key the input for use in a virtual set or effect, it would be best to feed it component, or at least YC. This will make it easier to get a good-looking key. Each input also has controls for adjusting the video called a processing amplifier, or ProcAmp for short. This gives you controls like you have on your television set: brightness, contrast, hue, and saturation. Brightness is the overall brightness of the signal. Contrast allows you to control the white and black levels. The more contrast applies means the whites get lighter and the blacks get darker. The hue control adjusts the actual colors themselves, shifting them around the color wheel. Finally, saturation controls the amount of color in the signal. Set this to 0 and the image is black and white. Even though you can adjust video signals as they come into the TriCaster, it is important to always feed the system the best quality video possible. The adjustments in the TriCaster should be used as tweaks, not total controls. If the input is too bright, try to iris down on the camera before using the ProcAmp. If the colors are not quite right, try manually white balancing the camera and turn off auto white balance before the shoot. Turn off things like auto gain control and autofocus and control these manually when possible. This will stop the camera from trying to compensate when there are lighting changes or when things move toward or away from the camera. Refer to your camera manual to learn these controls on your camera. The general rule of thumb here is garbage in, garbage out. So always feed the TriCaster the best signal you can. Now that you have your inputs set up, let's look at the main switcher interface. There are 3 rows of buttons here labeled Effects, Program, and Preview. Let's start with the Program row. Whatever is selected on this row is shown on the outputs. By default, this is also what is being streamed and what's being recorded. You can directly select any input on this row and it will cut to that input on Program Out. The output of this row is displayed here in the large monitor labeled Program. This is what you are broadcasting to the audience. Just below that is the preview row. This is what will be switched to when the TriCaster does a cut or a transition. Whatever is selected on this row is shown in the large preview monitor. This is not being broadcast. It is just showing the operator what will go out live when a transition or cut is performed. Let's put camera 1 on Program and camera 2 on Preview. Now hit the Take button next to the T-bar on the interface. Camera 2 cuts to Program, and camera 1 is now on Preview. They switched places. Now select camera 3 on Preview and Take. Put camera 1 on Preview and Take. So you are selecting the next shot on Preview and then cutting to it. Hit the Auto button. This will perform whatever transition is currently selected, which by default is a fade. It is always best to look at a channel on Preview and then switch to it as opposed to just selecting it on the Program row. Without previewing, you are not sure what you are switching to, so previewing helps you avoid mistakes. Notice that the interface is color-coded. The Program monitor is red, as is the selected button on the Program row, and the input selected on Program is also highlighted in red. Everything associated with Preview is green, and the Effects row is blue. Now there is no dedicated monitor for the Effects row, so only the selected button and associated input monitor are blue. These are just some of the basics for operating a live switcher, and this is covered in a lot more detail in the live operations section. The TriCaster 40 has a variety of outputs for broadcasting your live production. Let's start by looking at and configuring the video outputs. The outputs are here on the front of the system, and they are labeled 1 and 2. The resolution of output 1 will follow the session resolution. If you start a session in 1080i, then output 1 will be component 1080i. Let's look at the output configuration panel. Click on the gear in the upper right-hand corner of the Program Out monitor. The current session loaded is 1080i, so output 1 is 1080i. That is why the SD analog output controls are ghosted, as they are not used in high-definition output. If the session were set to a standard definition, then these controls would be active. Output number 2 in this TriCaster is always standard definition, no matter what the session resolution is set to. The aux format controls allow you to adjust the format and aspect ratio of this output independently. Below that are the controls for the second monitor attached to the graphics card. You can set the resolution of this output to make it compatible with just about any display, monitor, or projector. You can also choose what is going out the secondary display. It can be set to show Program, Preview, or the Effects row. Outputting the Effects row gives you an independent video output. You can, for instance, have Program Out going to one projector and this secondary display going to another with the Effects row. Now you can have the live show on Program Out and an independently switched graphics and video on the second display. You can only cut from one input to another on the Effects row, but this is very useful when wanting a second display to show PowerPoint or web pages on second screens in a production. There's a production clock available in this TriCaster. It shows the time of day and is always displayed in the upper right corner. This time can be set from the administrator mode. This is the time that will be stamped onto any recordings as timecode. The TriCaster has the ability to record the full resolution program output to the media drives attached to the system. To configure the recording, click on the gear next to the Record button under the Preview monitor. First, you can give your recording a base name. We will use training as the base name. If you start and stop the recording without changing the base name, the recordings will be numbered sequentially along with the base name. Next, choose what you wish to record. Using the pop-up for the source, you can choose to record program, auxiliary, or any of the 4 video inputs. Now, if you are recording an individual camera, say camera 1, it will record the resolution and aspect ratio coming into the input, regardless of the session resolution. Let's select Program as our recording source. This will record the final output of the production at the session resolution. Next, you can choose a format. This TriCaster features NewTek's own QuickTime format. This format is compatible with most non-linear editors with no conversion. Take the files recorded by the TriCaster directly to Final Cut, Premiere, Media Composer, or After Effects. There's also an H.264 codec for web to create smaller, easier to transfer files. Next, you can select where to record the video. This must be the internal D drive or an eSATA drive connected to the eSATA ports on the back of the machine. Remember, USB drives are not fast enough to support video recording or playback. You can also check the Add to DDR playlist button, and when you stop the recording process, that clip will show up in the DDR. This can be very useful when you want to be able to instantly review what you've just recorded. Once everything is configured, close the recording panel. To start the recording, simply hit the record button. You will see the counter start rolling. Now your selected source is being recorded. We are recording program out, so let's do some cuts and fades. To stop the recording, hit the record button again. Notice, since we had Add to DDR playlist selected, that as soon as we hit the record button to stop the recording, that clip is now ready for use in the DDR. You can now look at your clip and scrub through it to see everything that you've recorded. While in a live production, you have the ability to grab still images from program out. To configure the grabber, click on the gear next to the grab button. Like the record panel, you can give the images a base name, and they will be sequentially numbered along with that name. You can also choose to de-interlace the image. If you are working in interlaced formats like 1080i or standard definition at 480i, where the I stands for interlaced, that means each image is made up of 2 fields. And if there's a lot of motion when you try and capture the still, that still can look jittery. To remove this jitter, select the de-interlace function. Now this is not needed when working with progressive formats like 720p, where the P stands for progressive. There's also a feature to add the still being grabbed to Graphics Player 2, so they show up in the Graphics Player as you grab them. Once everything is configured for your session, you can exit the live desktop to save all of the session parameters. Simply click on the X in the upper right corner to exit to the Sessions page. From here, you can exit to the Home page by clicking on the arrow or the word Home in the upper left corner. Now you have access to all of the sessions on the system. A session can be renamed on the home page by right-clicking on it and selecting Rename. You also have the option to delete a session, but be careful, as this will also delete any media associated with that session, and this may be unrecoverable. Make sure to back up any session with all its content before you delete it if you think you might need it. To back up a session, go to its Sessions page and select Manage. Then select Backup Session. Now, if all of the content used in your session is imported through the Import Media requester before the session, then all of that content is considered to be internal to that session. And when you start a backup, Everything is backed up, including all of the content, and there are no options. Now, if you used content from another session or browsed to a drive and used content that was not imported, that is considered external content to the session. When backing up a session that has external content in it, you will get two options. Backup without importing will back up the session, but only the content that was internal or imported into the session. If you want to back up everything, choose Import and Backup. This will import all external content before backup, and all of the content is then backed up. Then select a location to store the backup. This can be any drive on the system, including USB drives. Once a session is backed up, it can be restored to any media drive. Go to the home page. Under each drive, there is an option to restore backup. Simply click on this, navigate, and select your backup. It will be restored to that drive with all its content, as long as it was all backed up with all of its content.